The void of space stretched endlessly before them, dark and silent, yet brimming with danger. The Queen's fleet, battered and weary, drifted in the shadows of broken planets and debris fields. The enemy had discovered their temporary refuge, and there was no longer anywhere to hide. Every sensor flashed with incoming threats, hundreds of warships, some larger than anything the Queen had ever commanded, all converging with a single purpose: to destroy her, to crush her empire entirely. The Queen stood at the command deck, her armored body tense, her compound eyes scanning the distant formations. Her mind, usually sharp with strategy, struggled against a storm of worry. She had survived impossible battles, outmaneuvered fleets, and evaded death countless times. Yet now she faced a threat that seemed insurmountable. The Veyari Empire's remnants depended on her, and she could not fail them. Elias, the human fighter who had become both her ally and a symbol of hope, hovered near the observation window, his small frame strikingly fragile against the backdrop of the immense flagship. He had been through countless battles, his ship battered and patched repeatedly, yet his eyes remained steady, focused, and unwavering. He knew what was at stake, and he understood that this final encounter might demand the ultimate sacrifice. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "We have one chance, one opportunity to turn the tide." The Queen turned toward him, her mandibles clacking softly. "Speak." Elias pointed to a narrow corridor between two asteroid clusters, their jagged edges like teeth in the darkness. "There is a weak point in their formation. If we strike there, we can split the enemy fleet and create chaos. Your ships can escape while I handle the dreadnought at the center." The Queen's eyes widened. The dreadnought he spoke of was massive, far larger and more powerful than any single human craft could reasonably challenge. "You would face it alone?" she asked, a note of incredulity in her voice. Elias gave a faint smile, calm despite the tension. "If I don't, the fleet dies. If I do, we have a chance." The Queen's chest tightened. She had witnessed his courage before, but this was beyond reason. One fragile human, risking everything against a warship designed to obliterate entire fleets. Yet she saw the determination in his eyes, the certainty that he would not yield no matter the odds. "Then we follow your plan," she said finally. "But know this, if you fail—" "I won't fail," he interrupted firmly. "I won't." The fleet moved into position, engines straining as they navigated the perilous corridor. Enemy fire raked the ships, tearing through shields and hulls. Explosions lit the void, and the sounds of combat echoed through the flagship. The Queen's warriors fought with desperate skill, following Elias's instructions as they advanced. Every maneuver, every diversion was calculated to maximize their survival. Elias darted ahead in his fighter, weaving through enemy fire with impossible agility. His weapons fired with precision, targeting critical points on the enemy dreadnought. The massive ship turned toward him, unleashing torrents of energy that would have vaporized any ordinary craft. Yet Elias remained unbroken, dancing through the storm of destruction, drawing the dreadnought's attention and creating an opening for the Veyari flagship to pass safely. The Queen watched in awe and fear. She had commanded countless battles, but never had she witnessed such selfless courage. One human, standing against impossible odds, protecting her and her people without hesitation. She realized that Elias had become more than an ally. He had become the embodiment of hope, a living testament to the strength of humanity. Hours seemed to pass in a blur. The Veyari fleet moved through the chaos, striking where Elias indicated, dodging enemy fire and escaping destruction. Yet the human fighter remained at the center of the storm, his small craft battered and barely holding together. Finally, the moment came. The dreadnought, immense and unstoppable, focused all its fire on Elias's fighter. The Queen's heart clenched as she saw the blasts tear through the void, catching him in their fury. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze, and then Elias's craft dove straight at the dreadnought, ramming into its hull with a calculated explosion that tore through the enemy ship's core. The blast was immense, engulfing both the dreadnought and Elias's fighter. Energy flared across the void, lighting up the battlefield like a second sun. The enemy fleet faltered, disorganized by the sudden destruction at its center. The Veyari ship seized the moment, scattering and retreating into safety. The Queen felt a wave of grief and awe crash over her. Elias had given everything. She knew with a certainty that chilled her that he had not survived the explosion. Yet his sacrifice had saved her fleet, saved her empire, and bought them a chance to live another day. For days afterward, the queen moved among her people, observing the survivors. Their eyes were wide with shock and relief, their spirits lifted despite the losses. Yet she could not stop thinking about Elias, the fragile human who had given everything without hesitation, without expectation, without fear. He had changed everything, not just the course of this battle, but her understanding of courage, loyalty, and strength. She ordered memorials for the fallen, including the human who had become a legend among her people in a single day. Stories spread of his courage, his selflessness, and his refusal to bow to despair. The Veyari began to speak of humans differently, no longer as a minor species, but as a people capable of extraordinary bravery. The queen herself felt a transformation within her. She had always ruled with strength and honor, believing that victory came from dominance and precision. Yet Elias had shown her another path, one where courage, selflessness, and the willingness to act for others defined true power. Weeks later, as the fleet recovered and repaired, the queen stood at the observation deck staring into the void. She felt a presence, though she knew it was only memory, only the echo of a small human fighter that had changed the course of her empire. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, "You gave everything, and because of you we live. Your courage will not be forgotten." The survivors spoke of the human often. Young pilots were taught about Elias's sacrifice, and veterans told stories of how a single fragile being could alter the fate of empires. Across the galaxy, whispers began to circulate. Humans were different. They were unpredictable, courageous beyond reason, and capable of acts that inspired hope even in the darkest hours. The queen's empire began to recover, slowly but surely. She rebuilt her fleets, strengthened alliances, and redefined her people's understanding of strength. She carried Elias's legacy with her, honoring the human who had given everything, and she vowed that her empire would never forget the lesson he had taught them. In the quiet moments, when the galaxy was still, the queen would close her eyes and imagine the small human fighter, moving fearlessly through the void, daring the impossible, and giving everything without hesitation. His courage had saved her, her people, and the hope for a future where the Veyari Empire could endure. And though Elias was gone, his impact remained. The queen knew that the memory of one human's bravery had changed the course of history. Humanity, fragile yet unstoppable in spirit, had proven its worth. For the first time in her long reign, the queen understood something profoundly simple yet powerful. True strength was not only measured in fleets or weapons, but in courage, selflessness, and the willingness to give everything, even when the odds were impossible. And because of that, the galaxy would never forget the human who gave everything to save a queen. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, dark but full of possibility. And in that darkness, the queen saw the spark of hope that Elias had left behind, a spark that would guide her empire for generations to come. The Veyari had survived. Humanity had proven its courage, and the legacy of one small, fragile human would echo across the stars forever. The stars stretched across the black sky like countless diamonds scattered on velvet. Ethan Cole leaned against the glass of the observation deck, his reflection dim against the brilliance of the cosmos. The outpost floated in orbit around a planet humans had only just begun to study. A world of green continents and wide silver oceans. Most of his crewmates found the planet beautiful but dangerous, filled with strange energy signatures that made equipment flicker and scanners unreliable. To Ethan, however, it felt alive, almost like the planet itself was breathing. He sighed as he adjusted his uniform collar, feeling the itch of boredom that came after weeks in space with the same routines. Most of the crew cared little about the mysteries below. They were more interested in collecting samples, logging data, and sending reports back to Earth. Ethan, however, was different. He had joined the mission not for numbers and charts, but for the chance to meet something, or someone, truly beyond the human experience. He wanted to see what was out there with his own eyes, not just through screens. When the order came to survey the forest regions near the equator, Ethan volunteered immediately. A shuttle ride later, he found himself stepping onto alien soil, the rich air carrying a faint humming sound, almost like music too deep for words. The forest stretched with tall, pale trees whose leaves shimmered with their own faint light. The air smelled sharp, clean, and wild. Ethan gripped his scanner but quickly lowered it. preferring to feel the place without constant beeping in his ears. Hours passed as he walked through the undergrowth, noting how strange birds darted above with wings like folded glass. He almost forgot the mission when he reached a clearing where streams of blue liquid flowed over smooth stones. Kneeling, he dipped his gloved fingers into the water. It was warm, humming faintly with energy. He whispered to himself, "No one on Earth would believe this." Then he heard it. A sound like soft footsteps brushing over leaves. His heart skipped. He stood quickly, hand resting near the small pulse pistol at his side, though he hated the thought of using it. From between the glowing trees she appeared. She was unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined, and yet strangely familiar in shape, tall and graceful. Her skin held a faint silver hue that seemed to reflect the light of the forest. Her eyes glowed a deep violet, sharp yet curious. Her hair, or something like it, floated as if carried by invisible currents, strands of pale blue drifting around her face. Ethan froze. The alien girl did too. For a long moment they stared at each other, neither moving, neither breathing. His training told him to call it in, to mark first contact and follow procedure. His heart told him not to break the fragile silence. Slowly, Ethan lowered his hand from the weapon and raised his palm in peace. "Hello," he whispered, voice low so as not to startle her. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing in curiosity. No words came from her, only a faint hum, almost like the sound of the streams. She stepped forward cautiously, her feet barely bending the grass beneath her. Ethan felt his throat dry. He wanted to say more, but the language barrier stood like a wall between them. So instead, he placed his hand gently against his chest and said, "Ethan." He tapped his chest again. "Ethan." Her violet eyes flickered as though studying him. Then she raised her hand to her chest. "Lyra." The word rolled off her tongue like music, soft and ringing. Ethan's lips curved into a smile. He repeated softly, "Lyra." The alien girl seemed to approve. She nodded slightly and lowered her hand. That was the beginning. The hours that followed were cautious but filled with wonder. Ethan pointed at trees, animals, the glowing water, and spoke their English names. Lyra watched him, sometimes repeating the words in her melodic tone. When he touched the blue water again, she placed her own hand above it, and the liquid responded, rising in a small spiral as though listening to her will. Ethan's eyes widened in awe. She smiled for the first time, faint but warm, and in that moment, he forgot every warning about alien dangers and interspecies risks. When the day ended and the light dimmed, Ethan knew he had to return to camp. Lyra seemed to sense it too. She stepped back into the glowing forest, her form fading into silver light. Ethan whispered her name, holding it in his heart as he made his way back to the shuttle. That night, back at the outpost, he could not sleep. His crewmates complained about faulty equipment, strange interference, and wasted time. Ethan barely listened. His mind replayed every detail of Lyra's glowing eyes, the way she had spoken her name, the way the water itself seemed to obey her. He turned in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. "Lyra," he murmured. It was the first time he had ever said an alien name with such tenderness. The next day, Ethan volunteered again for ground duty. His commander raised an eyebrow but agreed, happy to let someone else handle the boring scouting runs. Ethan returned to the clearing with the blue streams, heart beating fast, hoping she would come again. Hours passed, but just as he began to doubt, she stepped from the trees, cautious but not afraid. This time, their meeting was less silent. Ethan tried simple words, repeating them until Lyra seemed to understand. She answered with her own, and slowly, haltingly, a bridge began to form between their voices. He learned that her people were hidden deep within the forests, connected to the strange energies of the planet. She learned that Ethan was from a distant star, one of many humans searching for knowledge. They sat near the water as the day dimmed, pointing at stars, trading words, and laughing when mistakes twisted the meaning. Ethan noticed how Lyra's laughter sounded like wind chimes, soft but full of life. He also noticed how the closer they sat, the less alone he felt. Days turned into weeks. Each time Ethan found a reason to return to the clearing, Lyra would meet him there. He told her about Earth, about oceans without glowing water, about skies filled with clouds, about cities that touched the horizon. Lyra told him about her people's fear of outsiders, their belief that opening themselves to strangers would break the harmony of their world. She admitted she was breaking rules by speaking to him, but something in her heart told her to keep coming. One night, under the twin moons of her world, Ethan found himself staring at her longer than usual. The silver glow of her skin reflected the starlight, her violet eyes gentle but searching. He whispered softly, almost without thinking, "I wish I could marry her." He thought the words were carried away by the wind, but Lyra's ears caught more than he expected. Her head turned slightly, though she said nothing. Ethan felt his chest tighten, realizing what he had let slip. He tried to cover it with a smile, pretending it had been nothing more than a tired thought. Lyra's eyes softened. She said nothing still, but her silence was not rejection. It was a secret kept close, a thought she would carry with her. When Ethan returned to the outpost that night, he felt the weight of his own words. He had crossed a line in his heart. He knew the rules, the boundaries between species, the gulf of culture and biology. Yet he could not deny the truth. In Lyra, he had found not just the wonder of alien life, but the connection of a soul. As he lay in his bunk, sleep far from his eyes, Ethan realized the story of humanity among the stars was not just about exploration, conquest, or survival. It was about connection, about finding someone in the vast silence of the universe who could look into your heart and see you for who you were. And though he did not know what the future held, he knew this. Lyra had heard his whisper, and she had not turned away. The days on the planet slipped by with quiet rhythm, yet for Ethan every hour felt alive with secret meaning. His duties at the outpost were simple: log survey results, check scanners, report findings. But his heart waited for the moments when he could return to the forest clearing. His commander noticed his eagerness but did not question it, for Ethan always brought back small samples, notes, and details that made the reports look complete. To his crewmates, he was just another explorer doing his job. To Ethan, the clearing was no longer just part of the mission. It was where Lyra waited. Each time he descended to the surface, he found her near the glowing streams. She never stood too close at first, always appearing from the trees like a figure half hidden in light. But with every meeting, her caution softened. Soon they sat across from each other, then side by side, trading words, smiles, and laughter that felt like music carried by the wind. Communication grew slowly but steadily. Ethan pointed at stars, rivers, trees, and spoke their names. Lyra repeated them, adding her own words. She corrected him when he mispronounced, her voice gentle but amused. Ethan, in turn, tried to imitate the rise and fall of her language, though his tongue struggled with its flowing tones. They laughed at mistakes, shared meanings through gestures, and built something more powerful than grammar, a bridge of trust. One evening, when the twin moons cast silver light over the clearing, Lyra told him of her people. Her voice carried sadness when she spoke of the council that ruled her world. They feared outsiders, believing humans would bring disruption and conflict. Long ago, another species had touched their world, leaving scars that had never healed. Since then, her people withdrew into forests and cities hidden by energy fields, closing themselves away. To be seen with Ethan was dangerous for her, a breaking of sacred rules. Ethan listened in silence, guilt pressing into his chest. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that humans were different, but he knew humanity's history too well. Wars, greed, and mistakes that had burned worlds even on their own planet. Yet he also believed something else. Humans could change, and love could lead that change. So he placed his hand gently on the ground between them and said, "Friend." Lyra's violet eyes softened. She touched the same spot with her hand, echoing the word slowly, "Friend." But in his heart, Ethan knew it was more. Time did not stand still for them. Rumors began to spread within the outpost. Some of the crew reported seeing flashes of movement in the trees, or strange lights in the distance. The commander grew uneasy, reminding everyone that unknown life could be hostile. Security was doubled. Ethan felt fear coil in his stomach, for he knew if anyone discovered Lyra, they would see her not as a friend, but as a threat. One afternoon, when he returned from the forest, a fellow officer named Drayton stopped him in the corridor. Drayton's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You've been coming back late, Cole, always with that faraway look. What are you hiding out there?" Ethan forced a calm smile. "Just the forest. It's beautiful. Maybe you should come see it yourself," Drayton scoffed. "I don't trust beautiful things. They usually hide danger." He walked away, leaving Ethan uneasy. The pressure grew heavier when Lyra spoke of her own troubles. The council had noticed her absences. They warned her of punishment if she continued wandering near the human base. She confessed this in a hushed voice one evening, her hands trembling as she touched the stream's surface, making the water swirl with nervous energy. "You should not come again," she whispered in her own tongue. Though Ethan understood enough to feel the meaning, his chest tightened. "But I want to see you," he said, struggling with words, his voice rough with emotion. "You are my light." She turned her eyes away, torn between duty and feeling. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the planet's energy. At last she whispered, "I will come." "But it is danger." Ethan nodded, his heart both heavy and relieved. Their bond deepened under the weight of secrecy. He began bringing small things from the outpost, an image of Earth's ocean stored in his datapad, a recording of human music, a simple flower from the hydroponic bay. Lyra accepted them with wonder, her violet eyes glowing with delight. In return, she showed him the hidden gifts of her world. She touched a tree and made its bark shimmer with light. She sang softly to the streams, and the water rose into patterns that danced like living art. One night, as they sat close beneath the stars, Ethan felt the pull of something greater than friendship. He studied her profile, the curve of her face bathed in silver glow. Without meaning to, the words slipped from his lips once more, softer than a breath. "I wish I could marry her." He thought he had spoken only to himself, but Lyra's head tilted slightly. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. She did not answer, only looked at him with quiet intensity before lowering her gaze. The days that followed carried new shadows. Ethan's commander ordered the team to increase patrols, for strange readings showed unusual energy surges near the base. Drayton pressed harder, whispering to others that Ethan was hiding something. Trust within the outpost began to thin, just as trust between Lyra and her people grew fragile. Yet in the forest clearing, time felt different. Each meeting with Lyra was stolen from the eyes of two worlds. They spoke more, learning to share longer sentences, bridging gaps with gestures and smiles. Ethan told her about Earth's seasons, the way snow fell like silent feathers, the way autumn painted leaves red and gold. Lyra told him of her people's festivals when they sang with the rivers and lit the skies with living light. Their voices wove two distant worlds into one small circle of warmth. One evening, a storm swept over the planet. The skies roared with lightning that crackled in unnatural patterns, the air thick with electric hum. Ethan hurried to the clearing, fearing Lyra would not come. But she was there, standing tall against the storm, her hair streaming in unseen currents. "Storm is danger," she called, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Ethan ran to her, heart pounding. I couldn't stay away. The storm raged around them, tearing branches and sending streams into wild floods. Lyra raised her hands and the energy of the storm bent around her, the lightning splitting in two before touching the ground. Ethan watched in awe as she guided the chaos, her body glowing brighter than he had ever seen. When she lowered her arms, trembling, the storm eased. Exhausted, she leaned against him. Ethan held her tightly, his heart filled with fierce protectiveness. "You saved me," he whispered. She looked up at him, her eyes soft but shining. "No, we save each other." When the storm passed, they sat together, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. For the first time, Ethan felt not like an outsider, but like someone who belonged. Back at the outpost, however, suspicion reached its peak. Drayton claimed to have seen Ethan speaking to shadows in the forest. The commander warned him directly. "Cole, if you're keeping secrets, you're endangering us all. This planet is unstable and we don't know what lives here. Do not wander off alone again." Ethan nodded, but his heart rebelled. He could not give up Lyra. She was no danger to him. She was his reason to keep going, his proof that humans could find more than fear among the stars. As the days stretched forward, Ethan and Lyra's secret bond stood against the weight of two worlds pressing to tear them apart. He did not know what the future held, but each meeting whispered the same truth. Their connection was no accident. It was something greater, something neither council nor commander could break. And though Ethan's whisper of love hung unspoken between them, Lyra carried it quietly in her heart. She had heard his wish. She had not answered yet, but her silence was not rejection. It was waiting, as though she too longed for something more but feared the cost. The universe around them stirred with unseen threats. But in the forest clearing, under stars and moons, A human and an alien girl built a bond that neither time nor danger could erase. The calm days of the forest were broken one morning by a tremor that shook the ground beneath Ethan's feet. He had just stepped off the shuttle, eager to see Lyra when the tremor rolled through the clearing. Birds with folded glass wings scattered into the sky, and the streams of blue water quivered like a living being disturbed. Ethan's heart raced. This was not a natural quake. He scanned the forest with his instruments, but the readings were chaotic, flickering between intense energy surges and silence. Before he could react further, a ripple of light appeared above the treetops, sharp and unnatural. It moved fast, slicing through the sky like a living blade. Ethan instinctively ducked as branches cracked and fell around him. He had no time to understand what it was before he heard a familiar melodic voice behind him. "Ethan!" Lyra emerged from between the trees, her eyes wide and glowing violet. Her hair floated in the disturbance, energy swirling around her hands. She reached for him, pulling him toward a small depression in the ground where the trees formed a natural shelter. "What is happening?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. "They come," Lyra said, her words trembling. "Not our people. Another. Dangerous." From the edges of the forest, shapes began to move. Dark, sleek, and alien. Unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. They were tall, thin creatures with reflective black skin, eyes like burning coals and appendages that glimmered with sharp energy. They moved silently, but their presence carried a low vibration that made Ethan's chest ache. Lyra placed her hand on Ethan's arm. "They take energy," she whispered. "They want our planet." Ethan's pulse quickened. He had trained for unknown threats, for hostile life forms, but seeing them here, in the soft light of the forest, made all his drills feel useless. Yet he could not run. Not while Lyra stood beside him. "We have to warn the outpost," Ethan said. Lyra shook her head. "Too late. They come fast. We protect ourselves first." Together they moved through the forest, Lyra guiding him with an unspoken understanding of paths and currents only she knew. When they reached the clearing, the streams rose at her command, forming a protective barrier. Ethan watched in awe as water spiraled around her hands, glowing with energy that hummed against the alien invaders' advance. One of the creatures reached the barrier. The water struck it, crackling and splintering against its energy. It hissed and recoiled, but more kept coming, moving faster than Ethan could track. He realized the battle would not be simple. They were outnumbered, and their opponents seemed to adapt quickly to every movement. Ethan remembered the pulse pistol at his side. He fired, aiming for the dark shapes, but the weapon's effects barely slowed them. Lyra touched the ground, and the blue streams responded, twisting around the invaders, forcing them back with waves of energy. Still, more advanced and faster units pressed forward. Ethan's mind raced. "Lyra, we need a plan, not just defense." Her violet eyes met his, wide with both fear and determination. "Together," she said, Together, they moved as one. Ethan followed her lead, pointing the pulse pistol, covering angles, distracting the invaders. Lyra's hands guided streams, creating temporary barriers and striking the enemy with precision. It was unlike anything Ethan had experienced. Fighting side by side with someone whose command over the environment could rival the stars themselves, he felt a mixture of awe and reliance. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The creatures were relentless, their dark forms weaving through the forest, striking at trees and energy streams. Yet with each movement, Ethan realized something remarkable. These invaders did not anticipate human unpredictability. Where Lyra's control followed rhythm and harmony, Ethan added chaos. He moved differently, dodging and firing in ways the creatures could not read. Together, human and alien created a new kind of defense, combining instinct with skill, energy with will. In the midst of battle, Ethan was thrown backward by a surge of energy from a crashing stream. Pain tore through his side, and he fell onto the wet ground gasping. Above him, a dark invader loomed, ready to strike. He saw Lyra's expression change from determination to fear. She raised her hands, energy pulsing fiercely, but the invader advanced faster than her control could reach. Ethan felt a sudden instinct. He could not let her be hurt. Pushing through the pain, he rolled to his feet and lunged, grabbing a fallen branch and using it to disrupt the invader's path. The creature staggered, its focus broken, giving Lyra the moment she needed. She unleashed a burst of energy that sent it flying into the forest. The forest fell silent for a heartbeat. Then more shapes appeared. Ethan and Lyra exchanged a glance, understanding the truth without words. This was not the first wave, and it would not be the last. "Run to the outpost," Ethan said, clutching his side. Warn them. I'll hold them. No, Lyra said, grabbing his hand. Her touch was firm, anchoring him. We fight together always. Despite the pain, Ethan nodded. He realized the truth of what she said. Alone, they could only survive briefly. Together, they were stronger. As they pressed toward the outpost, Lyra used the energy of the streams to create illusions and barriers. Dark shapes crashed against invisible walls and disappeared before they could reach Ethan. Every step was tense, every movement calculated. Yet even amidst the chaos, Ethan noticed something that lifted his spirits. The quiet moments when Lyra looked at him, her eyes conveying trust, faith, and something deeper, unspoken but powerful. By the time they reached the human base, alarms were blaring, lights flashing. The creatures had begun probing the perimeter, striking at security drones and energy shields. The human crew scrambled, unprepared for such an advanced adversary. Ethan and Lyra arrived just in time, Lyra sending waves of energy to push back the invaders while Ethan coordinated the human defenses. The commander, initially furious at seeing Ethan at the front lines, quickly realized the truth. Ethan and Lyra together formed a force beyond understanding. Soldiers followed Ethan's directions, humans and alien energy combining in a dance of defense that surprised both sides. Hours passed in a blur of motion, fear, and determination. Ethan's side ached, fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, yet he could not stop. Every time Lyra's eyes found his, he felt strength return. They were no longer just a human and an alien. They were partners, a single force shaped by trust and shared purpose. At one point, a group of creatures breached the outer shield. Ethan ran forward, firing, but they were too fast. Lyra raised her hands, streams rising like walls of light. One of the invaders lunged at Ethan, but Lyra diverted it with a precise surge of energy, sending it crashing into another. The combined movement of human unpredictability and alien control began to turn the tide. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the invaders retreated. Their forms vanished into the trees, their energy spikes fading into silence. The clearing around the base was scarred, trees splintered, and the streams disturbed. But the humans and Lyra's people were alive. Ethan sank to the ground, breath coming in ragged gasps. Lyra knelt beside him, hands glowing faintly as she touched his shoulder to check he was unharmed. "You're hurt," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm fine," Ethan said, smiling through the pain. "Because we fought together." She looked into his eyes, violet glowing softly, and for the first time Ethan saw no fear. Only trust, only understanding, only a bond deeper than words could capture. In that moment, Ethan realized something he had known in his heart for weeks but never admitted aloud. He did not care about danger rules or what his world or hers might think. All that mattered was this: Lyra standing with him, fighting beside him, believing in him. He reached for her hand, gently holding it. Lyra did not pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand back, a silent affirmation of connection, of trust, of unspoken promise. Later, as the base repaired damage and recovered from the attack, Ethan and Lyra retreated to the clearing. The streams were calm now, humming quietly as if the planet itself acknowledged their victory. They sat together beneath the twin moons, exhausted, bruised, but unbroken. Ethan whispered more softly than ever, I wish I could always protect you." Lyra tilted her head, eyes gleaming. "No need," she whispered back. "We protect each other." And in that simple truth, Ethan found hope. Against impossible odds, humans and alien, together, had faced danger and survived. Against fear and misunderstanding, two hearts had found connection. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear: whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. The forest was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Days had passed since the first attack, but Ethan and Lyra knew it was only a pause, a brief calm before the storm returned. The human outpost worked tirelessly, repairing shields, fortifying defenses, and trying to understand the creatures that had invaded. Reports from the scanners showed irregular energy spikes, growing in intensity as if the invaders were gathering strength for a larger attack. Ethan could feel it in his bones. Something bigger was coming, something they might not survive without all their skill, courage, and trust. He found Lyra waiting at the clearing, her eyes glowing faintly in the evening light. She had been watching the streams, sensing the flow of energy in her world, preparing for what she sensed was inevitable. "They are coming," she said quietly, her voice tinged with worry. Soon, very soon. Ethan nodded. We'll be ready. Together. They spent the next hours preparing. Ethan coordinated the human defenses, explaining where energy barriers could be strengthened and which routes were vulnerable. Lyra moved through the clearing, hands hovering above the streams, causing them to ripple and rise in intricate patterns. She taught Ethan to sense the flow of energy, to anticipate its movement and use it as a guide. It was exhausting, mentally and physically, but Ethan felt a thrill he had never experienced before. Every new skill he learned brought him closer to her world and deeper into her trust. As night fell, a low vibration rolled through the planet, subtle at first, then stronger. Ethan's pulse quickened. The invaders had returned, more numerous than before. Shadows moved among the trees, their black forms glinting in the faint moonlight. The creatures moved faster now, coordinating in ways that had not been seen in the previous attack. The humans at the outpost braced themselves, weapons ready, but it was clear that the usual strategies would not be enough. Ethan stood beside Lyra, gripping his pulse pistol tightly, ready for anything. They will come through here, Lyra said, pointing to a narrow passage in the forest. Her hands rose, energy flowing from the streams into the trees, forming barriers that glimmered with pale light. We must protect them. You, me, together. Ethan nodded, swallowing fear. Let's do it. The first wave struck like a storm. Dark shapes surged against the barriers, claws and energy appendages lashing out. Ethan fired his pulse pistol, targeting the fastest attackers, while Lyra's control over the streams formed walls and spikes that drove back the others. The creatures were clever, splitting into smaller groups and attacking from multiple directions. But Ethan and Lyra moved in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's movements, covering blind spots, and countering attacks with a combination of human unpredictability and alien precision. Ours seemed to blend together. Ethan felt exhaustion in every muscle, but he could not stop. Lyra was near him at every step, her hands guiding energy with delicate, precise movements. She moved faster than he could follow, yet she constantly checked on him, her violet eyes filled with concern and encouragement. During a brief pause, a larger creature emerged, towering over the rest. Its eyes glowed like molten fire and its energy pulses distorted the air around it. Ethan realized immediately that this was the leader, the source of the attack. We face it, Lyra said softly. Together, Ethan took a deep breath. We can do this. They moved forward side by side. The leader lunged at Ethan first and instinctively he dodged, firing at the creature's energy nodes. It hissed and turned, targeting Lyra with powerful energy blasts. She responded with streams of glowing water, striking at its legs and forcing it backward. The fight escalated. The creature adapted quickly, dodging barriers, resisting attacks, and pressing the humans to their limits. Ethan was thrown against a tree, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Pain surged through his ribs, but he refused to stay down. Lyra extended her hands toward him, her energy forming a protective dome just before the creature's attack could hit. You are hurt, she cried. I am fine, Ethan gasped, gritting his teeth. We cannot stop. Not now. Lyra's eyes softened. She reached out, touching his shoulder gently. The energy of her world flowed into him, easing the pain and giving him strength. Together, they launched a coordinated attack. Ethan moved unpredictably, striking the creature's weak points, while Lyra manipulated the streams, weaving them into spikes and barriers that trapped the invader. For a moment, it seemed as though the creature would break free, but Ethan remembered something Lyra had taught him. Energy flowed in cycles, and even the strongest force could be directed with timing and intention. He called to Lyra, and together they focused every ounce of strength, pushing the streams in perfect harmony. The energy spiraled around the invader, pinning it in place until it fell, incapacitated. A cheer rose from the humans as the remaining creatures retreated, their coordination broken without their leader. Ethan and Lyra collapsed together on the ground, exhausted but victorious. Lyra turned to him, her violet eyes glistening. You are brave, she whispered. You are stronger, Ethan replied, his voice trembling. Without you, we would have lost. She smiled faintly, reaching out to touch his face. Together we are more than strong, we are more. Ethan felt his chest tighten. The words he had whispered before, the wish that had haunted him in quiet moments, surged forward. He leaned closer, his lips barely brushing hers. Lyra, he began, voice trembling. She did not pull away. Instead, she looked into his eyes, her expression full of trust, warmth, and something deeper that made his heart ache. She began, then paused, searching his eyes. I cannot say yet, she whispered, but I feel the same. Ethan nodded, understanding. Patience was part of this world as it was part of hers. The war had tested them, but it had also shown them their bond could withstand anything. They had faced overwhelming danger together and survived because of trust, skill, and the connection between them. Later, as the base assessed damage and repaired defenses, Ethan stayed close to Lyra. Soldiers and aliens worked side by side, inspired by the sight of two beings from different worlds standing together, demonstrating courage and cooperation. The story of the battle spread quickly through the outpost, a symbol of hope and unity. That night, Ethan and Lyra returned to the clearing, the streams glowing softly under the twin moons. The forest was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. They sat side by side, letting exhaustion ease from their bodies. I was afraid, Ethan admitted softly, his head resting near hers. Afraid I might lose you. Lyra turned her head, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. I was afraid too. Afraid that my world would forbid this, that we could not survive together. Ethan took her hand in his, holding it gently. We survived. We are stronger together, and He paused, searching for the courage to speak what he had felt for so long. I wish I could marry you. For a moment there was silence. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, and Ethan feared he had gone too far. But then slowly a soft smile spread across her face. Her violet eyes shone with warmth and understanding. My answer is yes, she whispered, her voice like music carried by the forest breeze. Ethan's chest felt light, as if the weight of fear and uncertainty had been lifted. He could hardly believe the words he had longed to hear. He pulled her close, holding her hand tightly, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his own. They sat together under the twin moons, the streams glowing softly beside them. The forest alive yet calm. For the first time, Ethan felt complete, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The battle had tested their courage, their skill, and their trust. It had shown them that fear could be overcome by cooperation, that love could give strength where weapons could not. And in the quiet of the clearing, Ethan and Lyra discovered a bond that no danger could break, a connection that would guide them through whatever the universe might throw their way. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan whispered softly, We survived. Together. Lyra nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. Together, she echoed, and for the first time words were not needed. Their hearts had spoken everything already.